Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Weekly Livestock Market Update. I'm Brownfield anchor reporter Tom Stever. Joining us from the University of Missouri, livestock market economist Scott Brown. Welcome, Scott.
Thanks for having me, Tom.
Absolutely. Well, it was a pretty good week for hogs. They're up $5.5 for the week, but cash cattle also just about steady on the cash cattle. How do those cash and futures markets go?
Yeah, I think if we start on the hog side, we'll get to the more positive news here for a second. You're correct. We were up almost $5.50 on cash hog prices, making a run now of about 4 consecutive weeks of higher prices, which is a big change from where we were just a month ago when we were certainly looking at some pretty low prices. You look at the October lean hog futures contract out there, also up again this week, up nearly $2 for the week. So more strength is all good. You look at the cutout value on the pork side, we were up $2.25 this week on that pork cutout value. We look across the board and we got strength in all those components, but bellies continue to help lead us higher in that pork cutout value. So a lot of good information coming on the pork side. And on cattle, I will say, it's been fairly steady the last few weeks, and this week's another one of those weeks where live cattle prices virtually unchanged from a week ago. You look at the October live cattle futures contract, up slightly, about 30 cents for the week. Similarly, the October feeder cattle futures contract also up 30 cents. On the cash side of feeder cattle, we were seeing those markets steady to 4 higher this week. And I think with the news we got on grain stocks today and some lower corn prices as a result of those higher stocks, perhaps those feeder cattle futures can continue to work higher as we go into next week. On the choice box beef price, virtually unchanged, but up slightly from where we were last week. Really led by higher rib prices this week that offset a lot of weakness in the other components on the beef side.
My gosh, Scott, we have record amounts of beef and poultry in cold storage. What's that going to do for the future of the market here?
Yeah, it's certainly one that we want to be paying attention to. Just what we're doing both in production as well as that ending stocks report we got this week. For the end of August, records amounts of beef and poultry. We set a new record in chicken ending stocks at nearly, but nearly 1 billion pounds of chicken ending stocks, 19% higher than where we were a year ago. That gets your attention. Beef that's up 6%. Maybe not quite so worrisome on the beef side, but certainly one that we're going to continue to pay attention to. And I guess maybe a little bit of positive news on the pork side, although we were only up 1% over a year ago on the pork side. So an ending stocks report certainly gave us more stocks across the board in all of these categories.
And the hog and pigs report is out, and if we look at that, we can see there's some expansion continuing in the hog business. What does this mean?
Yeah, so I think when you look at what we got yesterday in that hogs and pigs report, Tom, the first thing that sticks out is that everybody did really well in terms of those pre-report estimates, because almost every category that we saw, USDA came in really, really close to the average pre-report estimate that we had in the marketplace. Sow inventory at a little more than 6.3 million head of sows, up 3.5% from where we were a year ago at this time. It just reminds me that much of what we've talked about in terms of more pork production coming on board in 2019, this report confirms, given what we've seen so far. I guess a little bit of positive, for a number of reports, we were seeing USDA make revisions upward in either pig crop or sows farrowed. And this report, we actually saw some revisions downward in those numbers, expected given some of the slaughter runs that we had been seeing, but maybe a little bit of positive news there. I just look at that report and go, so we're going to be up 3.5%, maybe a little more than that in pork production in 2019. We really got to hone in on the demand side if we're going to keep those prices at reasonable levels on the pork side. Both export demand and domestic demand are going to be important given what we see as continued expansion.
I see coming up this week, we have a jobs report that could spell something for demand, for the demand picture.
Yeah, absolutely. So jobs report next week. And, Tom, as we've looked at those of late, they've all been really positive. We've seen the economy's been growing. I don't expect we're going to find anything different out of that jobs report next week. But any kind of slowdown in the U.S. economy as we get into 2019 certainly could be troubling in really both beef and pork, just given the increase in supplies of both of those meats we expect to continue in 2019. So we're going to pay close attention to what's happening on that demand front. And of course, we got all of the trade issues that still tend to loom, from African swine fever to tariffs, both with Mexico as well as then in China, that matter a lot as we look ahead to 2019. But next week, a little bit of focus on what's happening in terms of the domestic economy.
And just one thing before I let you go, Scott, when it changes here from 90s down to 70s, does that mean anything for domestic demand and what's happening in livestock?
Well, I do think we're starting to see what might be traditionally thought of as becoming to the end of grilling season, if you will. So maybe a little less demand, especially for some of those products that we tend to throw out on the grill will be coming as we look ahead. I'll just say, as we go here towards the end of the year and we talk about temperatures falling, we're going to make some pretty big hog runs as we get in the latter part of this year. And I think that equally could pressure prices. We've seen some really good run-ups in prices here the last 4 weeks on the hog side. And I think a lot of that had to do with some slowdown in slaughter numbers as a result of Hurricane Florence that we've dealt with. But this week we've come back on pretty strong in terms of hog slaughter numbers. That likely continues in front of us. I will say I worry about more downside risk in hog prices than upside potential as we kind of close out these last few months of 2018.
Okay, with that, Scott, we will talk to you next week.
Very good, Tom.
Well, to get our weekly livestock market update every Saturday morning, you can go to our website, brownfieldagnews.com, click on the subscribe link, and you can also submit questions on that link. Also, check out John Perkins' twice daily Brownfield Market Minute at brownfieldagnews.com. Have a great weekend. I'm Tom Stever on Brownfield.